The grand hall of Oralis Prime glittered like a jewel in the black sea of space, its ceiling arched high above, lined with panels of shimmering crystal that caught the light of distant stars. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds filled the chamber. Some floated in graceful clouds of vapor, others stood on many legs or hovered on wings that glimmered like liquid glass. All had come for the annual Summit of Species, a place for peace, trade, and politics. Humans were newcomers here. Commander Sa. Nathan Cole stood near the edge of the main gathering circle. He wore the deep blue uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, polished until it shone. The silver emblem over his heart, the crest of Earth and its colonies, caught the light when he moved. He was tall for a human, with short-cropped brown hair and calm gray eyes. His face was the sort people remembered not for beauty, but for the way it stayed composed, no matter the storm. The Thrin royal family had arrived only minutes before. They were a tall, scaled species, with gold and green patterns across their skin. Their voices were deep, and their language, translated by soft drones in the air, often sounded like rolling thunder. Prince Velkar was the youngest son of the Thrin Emperor. Barely 20 galactic years old, he already carried himself like he owned the stars. His crown, a thin ring of metal that hovered an inch above his brow, glowed faintly. His robe shimmered with embedded starlight threads. He was flanked by older Thrin nobles, their sharp eyes always watching. The hall had been noisy, filled with the hum of alien voices, until Velkar spoke. "I see the scavenger has arrived," Velkar said loudly, his voice carrying over the crowd. It took a moment for the words to sink in. The translator drones repeated his statement in the common trade tongue. The term scavenger was an insult among the Thrin, used for creatures that fed on scraps that lived off the leftovers of greater hunters. Several alien delegates looked sharply at Nathan. A few exchanged glances. Among the older species there was an unspoken rule: never insult someone at the summit unless you wanted trouble. Nathan's face didn't change. Velkar smiled, his sharp teeth catching the light. "Tell me, human," he continued, stepping closer, "does Earth still dig through the trash of other worlds? Or have you finally learned to build something without stealing parts?" The hall grew quieter. The Thrin nobles behind Velkar shifted slightly, watching Nathan's reaction. They expected anger. They expected the human to snap, to defend himself in front of everyone. Instead, Nathan simply looked at Velkar for a long moment. His gray eyes were steady, unreadable. He didn't speak. One corner of Velkar's mouth twitched upward, as if he thought he had won. Then Nathan turned. Slowly, deliberately, he pivoted on his heel, straightened the line of his uniform, and walked away. No words, no protest. Just the sound of his boots on the polished floor, fading as he moved toward the far exit of the hall. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the translator drones seemed to hesitate before resuming their quiet hum. Some alien delegates frowned. A few Thrin chuckled quietly. The younger alien merchants whispered among themselves, some amused, others puzzled. To the Thrin, walking. Away without defending yourself was a sign of weakness. But not all species saw it that way. Ambassador Raltesh of the Zikri, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into 1,000 colors, tilted her head toward her aide. "Do you know what it means when a human walks away?" she asked softly. The aide shook his head. "It means," Raltesh said, her voice low, "they are deciding something. And when they decide, they do not forget." Nathan didn't look. Back as he left the grand hall, he stepped into a side corridor lined with soft gold light. His pace was steady, but his mind was sharp and cold. The insult hadn't stung the way Velkar hoped, but it had reminded him of a truth humans had learned quickly in the wider galaxy. Respect was rarely given. it was taken or earned. And sometimes the quietest response left the deepest mark. Behind him, the party slowly resumed, but the mood had changed. Velkar's voice carried again as he spoke to a cluster of young nobles. "See? They know their place. They know who rules here." Some laughed. Others glanced toward the door Nathan had used, then away quickly. The laughter didn't sound quite as confident as before. High above the gathering, in the observation, Dek, an older Thryn elder named Sarath, kept his gaze on the human's empty place. He had fought in wars before Velkar was born. He had seen humans on battlefields, had watched them hold ground long after logic said they should fall. He leaned toward another elder and murmured, "The boy has just thrown a stone at still water. He will not like the ripples." Nathan reached the docking ring where the human delegation's small fleet was berthed. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Vance, was waiting. Her sharp eyes scanned his face. "Commander?" she asked quietly. "Summit's over for us," Nathan said. She frowned. "Sir?" He didn't answer, just kept walking toward the boarding ramp of their ship, the ardent resolve. "Send word to the fleet. Begin quiet recall procedures. All human personnel are to prepare for departure within 48 hours. Mara blinked but didn't question him. She had served under Nathan long enough to know that when he moved, in silence, he was already playing a longer game. Back in the Grand Hall, Velkar basked in the attention of those still willing to stand close to him. He was young, arrogant, and certain the humans' retreat had been victory. What he didn't notice, what most of the crowd didn't notice, was how a handful of alien delegates were already slipping away, some making quiet calls to their ships, others whispering to aides to keep an eye on the humans. And somewhere deep in the station's central control, an unnoticed log entry appeared. Human maintenance crews, scheduled departure pending. Velkar drank from a crystal goblet, unaware that his words had just set something in motion, something humans were very, very good at. 2 days had passed since the summit. The insult was still being talked about in the station's corridors, market halls, and docking bays. Some stories had grown wild. In one version, Prince Velkar had reduced the human to silence with a single sentence that broke his spirit. In another, Nathan had left because humans cannot handle the truth. The Thryn nobles enjoyed these stories, passing them around like wine. But other species were less sure. In the corner of the merchant district, an Urak trader with bright green scales spoke to a fellow merchant in low tones. "I tell you, it's never good when a human goes quiet," the Urak said. "I saw it on Darren Station. A mining company insulted a Terran captain. 3 weeks later, the company's ships were rusting in dock and no one would trade with them." The other merchant, a tall insectoid, clicked his mandibles nervously. "Coincidence," he said. The Urak shook his head. "Humans don't work. Like the Thryn. They don't shout and fight for show. They do something worse. They make you think they've forgotten. Then you wake up, and the ground under you is gone." Meanwhile, in the docking bay reserved for human ships, quiet activity had begun. The Ardent Resolve, Nathan's flagship, had sent a coded signal to all Terran vessels and personnel on Oralis Prime. It was short, with no explanations. Recall. Order, non-essential personnel prepare for departure, 48 hours. Keep calm, silent. No one questioned it aloud. The crews simply obeyed. On the lower levels of the station, human engineers worked in the air filtration hubs. They moved with steady hands, taking readings, adjusting settings. At the end of each shift, they carried tool cases back to their ships instead of leaving them in the maintenance lockers. No one noticed, at least not yet. The human cargo handlers in the station's supply bays finished their shifts and didn't return the next day. The loading cranes sat idle. Containers began stacking up. The alien supervisors grumbled, assuming it was a scheduling error. By the third day, the first real crack appeared. The central water processing unit on Deck 12 failed during the night cycle. It wasn't a total breakdown, just a slowdown that left half the residential decks with low water pressure. The Thrin maintenance crews tried to fix it, but the systems had human-designed filtration cores built to Earth specifications. The manuals were in English, with diagrams marked in Terran engineering symbols. The Thrin could not read them. Velkar's cousin, Lord Sauron, was overseeing the repair when a station aide suggested calling for human help. "We still have some Terran engineers aboard," the aide said. Sauron's pride bristled. "We will not crawl to them for help over a minor malfunction," he snapped. The malfunction took 32 hours to repair. Nathan stayed aboard the Ardent Resolve most of the time, but he followed every development through quiet reports from his people. Lieutenant Mara would bring him updates at the start and end of each station cycle. "Water problem on Deck 12 fixed," she said on the 4th day. "But it took them a day and a half." Nathan nodded. "And trade flow?" "Slowing." 3. "Merchant captains have complained already. One asked me if the recall was temporary." I didn't answer. Nathan's gray eyes stayed calm. "Good." On the 5th day, the whispers began. In the dining lounge of the Kalaran delegation, 2 envoys spoke over their meal. "The Thrin think they've won," one said, biting into a steamed root. "Have they?" the other asked. The first envoy leaned closer. "No, the humans are leaving. You know what that means for the station's docking systems, for the cargo flow. And the security systems, the humans wrote half the code. When something breaks, who will fix it?" The other envoy frowned. "You think they'll let the station fail?" "They don't have to let it. They just won't stop it." By the 6th day, the effects were harder to ignore. The station's southern docking ring suffered a guidance glitch. Ships coming in had to wait for manual clearance, slowing traffic to a crawl. Thrin technicians traced the problem to a failed calibration in the targeting sensors. Normally, it was a 10-minute fix. The problem was, the sensors had human-built processors. The Thrin had no spare parts, and no one who understood the firmware. A Thrin overseer swallowed his pride and sent a message to the Ardent Resolve, requesting assistance. Nathan sent back a polite reply. "All Terran personnel are engaged in departure preparations. Regretfully, we cannot offer assistance at this time." Velkar didn't notice the growing strain until one of his father's senior advisors came to see him. The advisor was tall and stern, his scales faded with age. "Your Highness, have you considered speaking to the humans?" Velkar laughed. "Why should I? They showed their weakness." The advisor's gaze was cold. "You are young, and you have not yet learned that silence can be dangerous. The humans may appear weak, but their absence is already felt. I have reports, trading delays, maintenance failures, growing complaints from the other species." Velkar waved a dismissive hand. "Let them complain. We will show them we do not need humans to run our station." The advisor said nothing, but his eyes were heavy with doubt. On the 8th day, Nathan stood in the Ardent Resolve's observation lounge, looking out at the vast arc of Oralis Prime's city lights. Mara joined him. More requests for help came in today, she said quietly. 2 from merchant fleets, 1 from the Zikri embassy, all politely ignored. Nathan's voice was even. "Any word from the Thrin royal court?" "Not a word," Mara said. Nathan smiled faintly. "Then we wait." The waiting ended sooner than he expected. On the 10th day, a minor crisis hit. The station's environmental monitoring system issued a warning. Oxygen levels were beginning to dip in the lower decks. It wasn't life-threatening yet, but the system controlling the air processors was old, upgraded by human engineers years ago. The Thrin maintenance crews tried to stabilize it, but the controls were locked behind. a human-coded security layer. Without the access keys, they couldn't make the changes needed. By the 11th day, panic began to show. In the bustling marketplace, alien merchants grumbled louder than usual. "Where are the humans?" a trader from the icy moon, Goric, demanded. "They've gone," another replied. "Pulled back to their ships. Won't even answer questions unless you're Thryn royalty." The first trader's eyes widened. "Why?" The other shook his head. "I heard the young prince insulted their leader at the summit. Thought he'd humiliated him. Now," he spread his hands, "now the humans are teaching him a lesson." That evening, as Velkar was dining in the royal quarters, a senior station administrator came to him, pale and tense. "Your Highness," the administrator said, "we need human assistance for the oxygen system. The processor firmware is theirs, and we don't have the keys. Without them, the lower decks will start losing breathable air within 40 hours. Velkar set down his drink. "Then send for them," the administrator hesitated. "They are refusing all requests from Thryn officials." Velkar's jaw tightened. "Then I will go myself." And in the docking ring, aboard the Ardent Resolve, Nathan received a brief message from the station's royal channel. "Prince Velkar requests a personal audience. Urgent matter." Nathan read it twice before answering. "Send him over, alone." The oxygen warning lights glowed an unsettling orange across the station's control rooms. Deck by deck, the air quality indicators showed a slow but steady decline. It wasn't yet dangerous, but the numbers told the truth. If the trend continued, parts of Oralis Prime would become unbreathable within days. Technicians hurried between consoles, their voices sharp with urgency. Some were Thryn, others from species that could survive thinner atmospheres. But even they understood the danger. The problem was simple and terrible at the same time. The oxygen processors had been upgraded years ago by human engineers. The control system ran on Terran code, and without the right access keys, no one could make the necessary adjustments. And all the humans who knew how had walked away. Prince Velkar stood in the royal quarters, watching the crisis unfold on a large display. The readings pulsed in steady orange lines. Every so often, the lines dipped lower, making the air feel heavier in the room, even though his personal quarters had extra oxygen systems. His father's senior advisor stood nearby, silent for once. Finally, Velkar turned to him. "This will pass," Velkar said, though his voice lacked conviction. The advisor didn't answer right away. He simply looked at the numbers. Then he said, "Your Highness, the humans have the solution, and they have chosen not to use it." Velkar's jaw tightened. "They are petty, then? Vindictive?" "No," the advisor said slowly. "They are deliberate. There is a difference. A petty being acts without purpose. A deliberate one acts with a goal." Velkar said nothing for a moment. He hated the thought of going to the human, hated the idea of appearing weak. But the image of hundreds of station residents gasping for breath was worse. "Prepare my shuttle," he said at last. "I will speak to Commander Cole." The shuttle ride was short, but it felt longer to Velkar. The craft glided out of the royal docks, across the curved spine of the station, and toward the docking ring where the human ships were berthed. The Ardent Resolve stood out even among the Terran fleet, sleek, dark, its hull marked with clean, white lettering in English. The docking clamps engaged with a solid thunk, and the shuttle door slid open. Two human security officers stood waiting at the airlock. They didn't bow, didn't greet him with the formal courtesy he was used to. One simply said, "This way." Velkar followed them through narrow metal corridors. The walls were plain, the lights functional rather than decorative. It was nothing like the shining halls of Oralis Prime, but there was a strange precision here, an order that felt unshakable. They stopped outside a door. One guard pressed a panel. "You may enter," the guard said. The door slid open. Nathan. Cole stood inside a simple meeting room. No gold, no ornate furniture. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a wall display showing the oxygen levels of Oralis Prime. "Your Highness," Nathan said calmly, without bowing. His tone was neither warm nor cold. It was simply level. Velkar stepped in, his robes trailing behind him. "Commander Cole, we have a situation." Nathan's gray eyes flicked to the display. "Yes, I'm aware." Velkar took a breath. "Our oxygen processors are malfunctioning. Your engineers installed them. We require your assistance." Nathan's expression didn't change. "You require our assistance?" Velkar hesitated. The words tasted unpleasant in his mouth. "Yes." Nathan walked to the display, tapped the screen, and brought up a deeper diagnostic. "It's not a malfunction. The processors are working fine. They simply need a recalibration, something that can only be done with Terran access codes." Velkar's eyes narrowed. "Then you can do it." "I can," Nathan said, "but I won't, not without something in return." Velkar's pride bristled. "Is this revenge for what I said at the summit?" Nathan turned to face him fully. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel beneath it. "What you said at the summit was an insult to every human in the galaxy. I could have answered you in front of the entire assembly. I didn't. Instead, I walked away. You assumed that meant weakness. It didn't. It meant choice." Velkar's tail twitched in irritation. "Choice?" "Yes," Nathan said. "The choice to remove the human presence from Oralis Prime. To let you see what happens when you treat an ally like a scavenger. The choice to let the station feel the absence of our engineers, our traders, our systems." Velkar stepped closer. "You are holding the station hostage." Nathan didn't flinch. "No. We are simply not volunteering our help to those who disrespect us. There is a difference." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound. Then Velkar said, "What do you want?" Nathan's answer was immediate. "A formal public acknowledgement that humans are an equal and valued member of the Galactic Council. From you, as a representative of the Thryn royal family. And a guarantee that your government will honor that acknowledgement in trade and in law." Velkar's pride burned, but he could see no way around it. The alternative was unthinkable. Mass panic, evacuations, and the humiliation of the Thryn Empire for failing to manage its own station. "I will consider your terms," Velkar said. Nathan stepped aside from the display. "Consider quickly. You have 36 hours before the oxygen levels drop below safety in the lower decks." Velkar turned to leave, but Nathan's voice stopped him. "Your Highness." Velkar looked back. Nathan's eyes were steady. "This was never about revenge. It's about respect. You'll find humans don't demand it, but they won't live without it." Velkar returned to the station in silence. His shuttle crew sensed his mood and kept quiet. Back in the royal quarters, the senior advisor was waiting. "Well?" the advisor asked. Velkar's shoulders felt heavy. "He wants a public acknowledgement of human equality and a guarantee in law." The advisor's mouth curved in something like approval. "A reasonable demand." Velkar gave him a sharp look. "Reasonable? He is forcing my hand." The advisor shrugged. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he is giving you a chance to repair what your pride has damaged." The next station cycle was tense. Rumors spread fast. Velkar had gone to the humans. The humans had made demands, and the oxygen problem was worse than reported. Merchants began preparing for possible evacuation, though no official order had been given. On the lower decks, residents whispered to each other in the corridors, eyes darting toward the ceiling vents as if they could already feel the air thinning. By the time the second day arrived, Velkar knew he had no choice. The announcement was made in the Grand Hall, with delegates from every species present. The hall was quieter than it had been during the summit. No one was here for celebration. Velkar stood on the central platform, the hover crown above his head glinting faintly. He cleared his throat, and his voice carried through the translator drones. "On behalf of the Thrin royal family," Velkar said, "I acknowledge the humans of Earth and their colonies as equal and valued members of the Galactic Council. We recognize their contributions to Oralis Prime and commit to honoring this recognition in all future trade and law." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Some delegates nodded approvingly, others exchanged cautious looks. When the announcement ended, Nathan stepped forward from the edge of the platform. He nodded once, polite but not deferential. Then he turned to his wrist console and spoke into it. "All Terran engineers, begin immediate oxygen processor recalibration. Priority 1. The change was almost instant. Within an hour, the orange oxygen warnings began to fade to green. The tension in the station eased, though the memory of the crisis lingered. Velkar returned to his quarters, exhausted in a way he had never felt before. He had not fought a battle, yet he felt he had lost one. In the quiet, his advisor spoke. "You will remember this lesson, I hope." Velkar didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Yes, I will remember that the most dangerous power is not the blade or the fleet. It is the ability to walk away." By the end of that cycle, the humans had resumed some of their work on the station, but not all. And for the first time, Velkar noticed the way other species spoke to Nathan, with respect, yes, but also with a certain caution, and he understood why. The air in Oralis Prime felt different after the apology. It was not a loud or flashy change, but something subtle that moved through the station like a slow current beneath the surface. In the grand halls where diplomats gathered, in the markets, where merchants traded, and in the quiet corners where engineers worked, a new understanding was forming. The humans were no longer just outsiders who could be ignored or insulted. They had shown their power, not by weapons or threats, but by choice. Nathan Cole watched this change quietly from the bridge of the Ardent Resolve. The station's massive windows showed the bright stars beyond, but his mind was on the fragile balance inside. Velkar no longer spoke openly of the insult. Pride had taught him a hard lesson. Publicly, he honored the agreement. Privately, he wrestled with his own doubts. His advisors urged caution. "The humans are clever," one said. "They will not give up their advantage so easily." Velkar nodded, but he also knew there was no turning back. The humans were now equal players at the council table, and any further disrespect could mean disaster. Nathan began quietly sending human experts into the station's key departments again: engineering, security, trade negotiation. Each time, they worked efficiently and without fanfare. The other species noticed. The Zikri envoys whispered to each other in the corridors. The Kalaran traders watched the humans carefully in the markets. Even the Thrin royal court kept a closer eye on the Ardent Resolve. Yet Nathan never flaunted his position. He remained calm, polite, and professional, his words measured, his presence unassuming. It was as if he carried an invisible weight that made others step carefully around him. One evening, in the station's central trade hall, Mara approached Nathan with news. "Commander," she said, "the Kalaran traders have requested a meeting. They want to discuss their concerns about the new human presence." Nathan considered this. "Set the meeting. Let them speak." The meeting was held in a large conference room. The Kalaran delegation was led by a sharp-eyed woman named Sarin, known for her skill in trade and negotiation. "We do not oppose the humans," Sarin said at the start, "but we worry that their growing influence will upset the balance of power. Oralis Prime has thrived on cooperation, not domination." Nathan listened carefully. Cooperation is indeed essential. Humans do not seek to dominate, but to contribute. We believe a stable, fair system benefits everyone. Saren raised an eyebrow. Words are easy, but your actions show strength. We must be sure this strength will not be used to control. Nathan nodded. Understandable. Trust is earned over time. I welcome your scrutiny. The meeting ended with a tentative agreement to observe and communicate more closely. Nathan saw it as a small victory. Back on the ardent resolve, he turned to Mara. We will continue to build trust by action, not just words. Mara smiled slightly. That is the human way, isn't it? Nathan's eyes held a hint of a smile. Yes, it is. Meanwhile, Velkar faced pressure from within his own court. Some nobles whispered that he had been humiliated, that the humans had gained too much. Others saw the practical truth. The humans held power in their hands now, and it was wiser to work with them. Velkar chose a middle path. He began hosting gatherings with human diplomats, attending joint events, and showing a public willingness to cooperate. But inside, he planned. He would prove the Thryn were still strong. The human lesson was clear. Respect, yes, but never weakness. Nathan also knew the importance of balance. He quietly supported young Terran traders who wanted to set up new businesses on Oralis Prime. They brought fresh goods, new technology, and a calm professionalism that impressed many. The station's trade volume began to rise again, but this time the humans were not just participants. They were leaders in some sectors. Alien merchants grumbled, but they also adapted. The Zikri adjusted their trade routes. The Urak tried new partnerships. The station's economy was changing, slowly, quietly, but irrevocably. One day, a crisis flared. A sudden solar storm disrupted communications across the station. Several docking systems failed, ships were delayed, and tempers flared among traders. The station's own tech teams scrambled to fix the problem, but the systems were complex and intertwined with human designs. Nathan's engineers stepped in, quickly, working alongside the station's crews. Velkar watched from his quarters, surprised at how smoothly the humans took control of the situation. The storm lasted 3 days, but the damage was minimal. The humans' calm efficiency earned grudging respect from many. After the storm, Velkar met privately with Nathan in the station's diplomatic chamber. You and your people have saved the station, Velkar said, his voice quieter than before. Nathan looked at him steadily. We did what was necessary. The station's safety is in everyone's interest. Velkar nodded slowly. I see now the value in your presence. The station is stronger with humans, not weaker. Nathan's eyes held a spark of approval. Then perhaps we have begun to understand each other. As the weeks passed, the two men found a cautious respect growing between them. Velkar still had pride, but he learned patience. Nathan still held power, but he tempered it with diplomacy. The other species watched, some hopeful, some wary. The station moved forward, not as a battlefield for insult and pride, but as a place where strength was shown by quiet, steady cooperation. 1. Evening, Nathan stood on the observation deck with Mara. The station feels different now, Mara said. Nathan nodded. It does. A fragile peace, built on respect and understanding. Mara smiled. Do you think it will last? Nathan looked out at the stars. It must. Because this is only the beginning. The story was far from over. The human presence on Oralis Prime was growing stronger, not by force but by choice, and the galaxy was watching. The calm that had settled over Oralis Prime felt almost like a fragile glass bubble, beautiful, but ready to shatter at any moment. For weeks, the humans and the Thryn had walked a tightrope between cooperation and rivalry. Both sides knew that any mistake could send the station back into chaos. Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the Ardent Resolve, watching the hum of activity below. The station was alive again, bustling with ships, traders, and diplomats. The air was clean, the systems running smoothly, and the uneasy tension was replaced with a cautious hope. But Nathan knew better than to trust hope alone. Velkar had changed, too. He no longer held his head high in arrogant pride. Instead, his strength came from understanding the balance of power and respect. One morning, a message arrived for Nathan. It was from Velkar himself, requesting a private meeting in the station's central diplomatic hall. Nathan accepted, knowing this could mark a turning point. The hall was quiet when Nathan arrived. Velkar was already there, standing tall, but with a seriousness that caught Nathan's attention. "Commander," Velkar began, "the events of the past weeks have shown me much. I was wrong to insult your people. Your choice to walk away was not weakness, but strength." Nathan nodded. "And your choice to come here shows wisdom." Velkar took a step closer. "I want to propose something. A new alliance between the Thrinn and the Terrans, not based on fear or obligation, but on mutual respect and benefit." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. "An alliance is not a simple thing." "No," Velkar agreed. "But the galaxy grows more dangerous. Alone, we are vulnerable. Together, we can be strong." The proposal shocked many when it was announced later that day. The Thrinn and humans were to form a formal alliance, sharing technology, trade routes, and military support. The Galactic Council watched closely. Some species applauded the move. Others whispered of hidden threats. But for Nathan and Velkar, the decision was clear. They had learned from each other. The alliance brought new energy to Oralis Prime. Human engineers shared advanced systems openly. Thrinn diplomats worked alongside Terran negotiators. Trade flourished. The station became a symbol, a beacon of what cooperation could achieve in a galaxy often torn by conflict. One evening, Nathan met Mara on the observation deck. The stars stretched out endlessly before them. "Do you think they really trust us?" Mara asked. Nathan smiled softly. "Trust takes time, but they respect us now. And respect is the foundation for anything stronger." Mara nodded. "And what about the insult? Will Velkar ever forget?" Nathan looked toward the distant lights of the station. He never forgot, but he learned something more important. That strength is not in words, but in actions. News arrived from the outer colonies, a warning of a rising threat from a hostile species seeking to conquer the border systems. Velkar and Nathan stood together as the Galactic Council called for defense. This time, they were ready. The joint fleet of Thrinn and Terran ships launched with precision. They moved not as rivals, but as allies. In the heat of battle, Velkar fought with honor, Nathan with calm determination. Their forces held the line, pushing back the invaders. When the dust settled, the threat was defeated. Back on Oralis Prime, celebrations erupted. The station had not only survived, but grown stronger through unity. Velkar and Nathan stood on the grand balcony overlooking the crowd. "Together," Velkar said quietly, "we have changed the course of this station, and perhaps the galaxy." Nathan smiled. "The future is ours to build, not with pride or insults, but with respect." The story of the young alien royal and the human commander became legend, not for the insult, but for the choice to walk away, and then walk forward together. The galaxy watched and learned.